thank you for being here. Marcel Mule, Sigurd Rascher, and the saxophone. So this is not the interview with Branford Marsalis. You missed that. That was earlier. The germinating idea behind all of this is that modern classical saxophone's performance begins with Marcel Mule and Sigurd Rascher. These influential musicians perceived the saxophone differently than most, perhaps all, of their predecessors, and succeeded in elevating the saxophone's position in the musical world. Although the careers of these remarkable saxophonists ended decades ago, their influences continued. Their lives, their careers, and their legacies contain what I have found to be interesting parallels as well as differences, which may serve to illuminate the present state of the saxophone. Another way of saying that, I suppose, is if we understand where we have been, perhaps we have a better chance of figuring out where we are and where we might be going. I hope you all have the outline. As I told one of you, it will help with the exam following. And it'll also help to keep me on track as well. You can see whether we start with the lives of these musicians. Both were born in the first decade of the 20th century, Mule on June the 22nd, 1901, and Rascher on May the 15th of 1907. Their birthplaces, Mule in Alto, France, and Rascher in Elberfeld, Germany, are perhaps 300 to 400 miles apart. In each case, the family moved when the children were about 5 years of age. Mule's family moved to another part of Normandy, and Rascher's family moved to Switzerland, later returning to Germany. Mule's father was an accountant with a love for music. He also conducted the town band, played the saxophone, and gave music lessons to students in town, including his son, Marcel. Rascher's parents were also musical. Rascher's father played the lute, and his mother sang. In each instance, this musical tradition continued to the next generation. Rascher's daughter, Corinna, has become a well-known saxophonist based in Germany, I believe, at the present time. Mule's sons, Paul and Jacques, became professional musicians, conductor and flutist, respectively. Mule lived for all of his life in France, while Rascher, after Hitler's rise to power in 1933, left Germany. There's a story that I've heard, and I hope it can be corroborated. Somebody put a note on his door that translated would roughly come out, saxophone rhymes with Cohen, a Jewish name, better get going. I've heard that story. I don't know if it's true.
It's true. He moved 8 times in 1 year.
Wow. Rascher, I'm sorry.
He moved 8 times in 1 year in Berlin.
Stay ahead. Rascher took residence in Copenhagen, Denmark, and then Malmö, Sweden. He came to the United States in 1939 and lived in Sichuan, New York. In 1994, he suffered a stroke, which left him unable to speak or to read, and he passed away on February 25th, 2001. Mule retired to Sanary from Paris in the south of France and moved to Garassac to live with his son Jacques after he lost his eyesight. Mule passed away on December 17th, 2001 at the age of 100. Let's see if I can, I'm not very good technologically, let's see. A favorite photo of mine. Mule came to the saxophone early, being introduced to it at the age of 7 by his father. Rascher came to the saxophone relatively late, at the age of 21, after studying clarinet at the Hochschule für Musik in Stuttgart. We should also mention, however, that it's true that Mule played the saxophone, alto and soprano, only occasionally from about the age of 13 until 20. Mule's reintroduction to the instrument resulted from his entrance in the military in 1921. He earned extra income by playing in jazz and dance bands. Rascher initially came to the saxophone by playing in various jazz bands as well.
Dance band.
Dance bands, excuse me. As that instrument proved to be much more in demand than the clarinet. Rascher resumed his studies in Stuttgart, but on the saxophone in his early to mid-20s, at about the same time that Mule began his musical studies at the Paris Conservatory with music literature professor Georges Cassot and violinist Gabriel Violin. Whoops, that's not the one that's supposed to be there. I told you I wasn't very good at this. Well, let's keep trying this until I get to the one that I want. There's the one that I wanted. It's the earliest picture that I have of Mr. Rascher. At this point in their lives, the careers of these two artists diverge, but perhaps move in parallel paths. Mule joined the Garde Républicaine in 1923, where he remained for 13 years. The Garde offered ample time to its members, ample free time, and so he made recordings, concerts with various orchestras, appeared in films, played at the opera. In contrast to Mule's secure position, Rascher taught school and through acquaintances in the orchestra occasionally played the saxophone as parts were needed in the Berlin Philharmonic. Rascher presented his first recital and his first solo performance with orchestra at the age of 25 in 1932. The solo performance with the Berlin Philharmonic, Edmund von Bork's Concerto, launched Rascher's career in the next few years. He performed numerous works written for him in Europe, Australia, and in the United States. Mule's performances were principally on the European continent, with two exceptions. In 1955, his quartet toured Canada, and then he made a tour of the United States with the Boston Symphony Orchestra in 1958. I've often wondered if Rascher's earlier success encouraged Mule to leave the secure position he had with the Garde and strike out on his own. Perhaps there was a career possibility for him. Mr. Rascher might have shown him that. Mule was active as a performer as early as 1925, appearing throughout Europe. His career as a soloist, however, began in November of 1935, a year before he left the Garde, with the performance of the Concerto by Pierre Bellon with the Padelou Orchestra, Albert Volk conducting. Interestingly, this event and Mule's decision to leave Garde coincide closely with the composition of the Ibert Concertino de Camara, frequently performed by both saxophonists. And so again, I speculate that maybe Mule sensed that there was an emerging opportunity to pursue a soloist's career. An important difference in the careers of the two is Mule's lengthy teaching career. He was appointed the second professor of saxophone in the history of the Paris National Conservatory, following Adolphe Sax. And that brings up something which I don't know what it means, but I find it very interesting. Mule began at the Paris Conservatory in 1942. How many years ago was that? I mean, you didn't know there was going to be math, but how long ago was that? 70 years. From the beginning of Mule's tenure to the end of Sax's tenure is a longer period. In other words, when Mule began at the Paris Conservatory, he was further away from Adolphe Sax than we are from the beginning of Mule's career. Again, I'm not sure what that means, but I find it very interesting to consider. It tells me something about the youth of our instrument. Mule's association with the Conservatory from 1942 through 1967 proved crucial to the establishment of the saxophone as a classical instrument because of the pedagogy which he was forced to develop. He had to establish a curriculum. Rascher didn't have a long relationship with any college, school, or conservatory, but he did teach at the Royal Danish Conservatory from 1933 to 1938, the Conservatory in Malmö, Sweden from 1934 to 1938, the Manhattan School of Music in New York City, 1940 to 1942, and then there were the famous summer sessions at the Eastman School of Music in the 1960s. And of course, he presented numerous saxophone workshops and clinics. Mule's pioneering career as a teacher required him to create a body of pedagogical literature based principally on classical studies for the violin, the second instrument, flute, and oboe, think the Fairley etudes in particular. In addition, he transcribed and arranged more than 100 works from the Baroque, classical, and Romantic periods. Rascher also created a number of teaching studies. The most important one, I would think, the top tones, from which this photograph comes, the original edition of top tones, written to address the above normal range of the saxophone. He also arranged and transcribed numerous works, some for his own concert repertoire and some for young saxophonists. In 1958, let me see if I'll probably have to go all the way around here, won't I?
Use the left keyboard to go back this way.
I'll ask you to do that, would you please? I don't embarrass myself. In 1958, Mule received the, I won't even attempt the French, it's a knighthood, essentially, a chevalier, a Legion of Honor. It's the highest honor that can be awarded to a French citizen. This was after his tour with the Boston Symphony. He retired from solo performing in 1960 at the age of 59 for reasons of health. In addition to that, Mule said that it was important to him that the public have a good memory of him, and he wanted to retire while he was still playing well. Rascher's final solo performance took place on May 14, 1977, which was the eve of his 70th birthday. The Guard Republican Quartet, and that should be in there. All I can tell you is that they were in order on my computer last night. And I transferred them over. Maybe we should just take time, instead of my trying to coordinate it, to look at some of these photographs. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Karina, am I fairly close to the correct date on this?
Yeah, I would say end of 50s. And I have a better one than that, that's so fuzzy. Ask me.
This is my favorite photograph. Your mother sent it to me about 10 years ago. Is that approximately the right date also?
Yeah, could be.
Another one of my favorites. Holding an 8-all saxophone. I'll guess it's number 36. Wasn't that the one he had?
Yes.
And the keyless saxophone that Busher built for him. There's the one that I was looking for, and we finally got there, but it's worth looking at those others, certainly. The Guard Republican Quartet remains one of the most important saxophone ensembles by virtue of its very existence. But at the time of its first concert, on December the 2nd, 1928, it had already established the now standard French instrumentation of soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. And throughout the 4 decades of the quartet's existence, Mule always played the soprano saxophone. They made numerous concert performances, radio broadcasts, and recordings, and established a wonderfully high level of tone, intonation, technique, and musicianship. Mule and 2 other members of the quartet left the Guard in 1936. They changed it to the Quartet of Saxophones of Paris, and in 1951 it became the Marcel Mule Saxophone Quartet. They played transcriptions, usually done by members of the quartet, but an increasing number of original works by Botza, Desenclos, Lazanov, Riviere, and Schmidt that become an important part of the literature for the saxophone quartet. They disbanded in 1967, the last year of Mule's tenure at the Paris Conservatory. Saxophone Quartet was founded in 1969, and long after Rascher gained fame as a soloist, his daughter Karina performing on soprano saxophone in that ensemble. Unlike the Mule Quartet, the Rascher Quartet continued after Rascher's retirement in 1981. Numerous composers, including Walter Hartley, Erland von Koch, Zdeněk Lukács, and Robert Ster, have written works for the ensemble that have entered the permanent repertoire of the Saxophone Quartet. That takes us then on the handout into legacy. Unquestionably, both artists made unparalleled contributions to the saxophone and its literature. This must have been a tremendously fertile time in the 1930s. I'm thinking not only about the reintroduction of the saxophone by Mule and Rascher, but of the harpsichord by Wanda Landowska, of the cello by Pablo Casal, of the harpsichord, did I get those mixed up? Guitar, Andres Segovia, sorry. Harpsichord, Wanda Landowska, and cello, Pablo Casal. So future generations of saxophonists will continue to be influenced by the legacy of these two musicians, and so we'll attempt to assess the impact at the present time of these two. Rascher, as a performer, is remembered very clearly for the altissimo register he championed throughout his career, and which is now required of all saxophonists. Mule's legacy includes his marvelous technical facility and a musical elegance. Rascher is also remembered for his imaginative use of articulation, the slap tongue, for example. Mule had a rapid and clean articulation that was an important adjunct to his fingers technique. Numerous compositions were written for each artist. Most of the compositions dedicated to Mule were by French composers, Bunot, Bozza, Desinclos, Tomasi, but also Pedro Villa-Lobos, the Brazilian. Those written for Rascher are much more broadly international, with major works by Dahl, Glazunov, Hindemith, Husa, Ibert, Martin, to name only a few of the more prominent composers. Rascher seemed to be almost prescient in his ability to identify composers whose names would lend credibility to the instrument. It would appear that, to me, that the works which Rascher created, caused to have be created for the saxophone, were among his most important contributions. At the same time, we should note Mule's influence as a teacher, and those touched by Mule's teaching have spread throughout the world and influenced our perception of the instrument's potentialities. In addition to the many compositions dedicated to him, Rascher has left a number of articles that he wrote for major music magazines of the day. They provide insight into his perception of the saxophone as well as to other topics. And of course, it served to keep his name before the public. Mule's name continues to be a pedagogical force by virtue of the method books and the transcriptions, the etudes and so forth that he wrote. That basis of systematic saxophone instruction which he had to create at the Paris Conservatory has lived on beyond him as well. Rascher was well known for his long affiliation with Buescher saxophones. He preferred instruments of the 1920s, 1930s vintage, and these are sought after by many people today. He also played a style of mouthpiece similar to that created in the previous century. Mule played a saxophone made by Quinon, C-U-E-S-N-O-N, for a number of years during his career, but is probably most strongly associated with Selmer in most people's minds because of his work in developing the legendary Mark VI. For more than 20 years, Mule played a metal mouthpiece, and as a result, almost all of his pupils did, and many of their pupils as well. Both saxophonists began making recordings in the 1930s, although I'm aware of more recordings by Mule than I am of Rascher. Without a doubt, we're fortunate that some of Mule's recordings are now available on compact disc reissues, and I hope that we'll have recordings of Mr. Rascher available sometime in the near future. In addition to the solo and quartet recordings, Mule also occasionally made orchestral recordings, such as the Bizet L'Arlésienne suites. Those have been reissued, incidentally. With the exception with very few exceptions, I don't know of any work by Mr. Rascher as a member of the orchestra after he launched his solo career in 1932. Having spoken about those recordings, I'll turn it over to you. I have some recordings of Mule and Rascher playing the same music. I suspect you'll have no difficulty in telling which is which, but I would invite your comments as to what you hear. Remember, music is listening, and so I would encourage active listening, and perhaps you can tell me what you hear on this first recording. I gave it to you. This is a gavotte by Jean-Philippe Rameau, the Temple of Glory. Track one. Track one. That recording was made in the 1930s, but I think our ears adjust pretty quickly to the limitations of recording at that time. This is a little bit more recent recording. Same work. As I suggest to my students, go with the obvious.
From a phrasing standpoint, the vibrato doesn't seem to be as integrated into a sound. Rascher seems to have more of an integration into a sound, and Mule is much more apparent vibrato constancy, so it's like apart from the tone.
It's a wonderful observation. I wouldn't call that the obvious, but okay.
Yeah, because that's what we hear over here, being part of the sound, yeah.
Thank you.
About the vibrato, they didn't sound that different in width or speed. They both sounded pretty brilliant. I mean, they were just kind of in a different part of the phrasing.
Yeah.
Now, please, as far as I'm concerned, there are no right or wrong answers. What you hear is what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Tempo? That was part of what I meant by obvious.
The second piece was faster than the
Considerably faster.
and also the trill notes.
Yeah, the trills as well.
Not only
Mule's
faster,
recording.
not only faster, but a different kind of motion within the line. A little more freedom, it seems like, than Mule. For me, Mule is a very light, elegant, sort of simple approach. And Rascher took a little more freedom with the time and shaped the lines in quite a different way.
I don't want to interrupt the comments, but I did simply want to respond that Mule's recording takes 3 minutes and 3 seconds, and Rascher's recording takes 2 minutes and 28 seconds. Now, please, Dad, having interrupted you, please, what do you hear?
The second recording was more ornamented. There was more ornamentation added in the second recording.
And different articulation.
I'm sorry?
It's very simple basic tunes, it's brighter. was more dynamic variation in the second one.
I'm sorry.
There was more dynamic variation in the second one.
Okay. Some of that may have been the 20 years difference. I mean, that might be part of it, I don't know. But it's a good observation. As I said, I don't think there are any right or wrong answers. What you hear is what you hear. Should
Do
you
you
listen
think
to
the
another?
recording?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Do you think the recording company encouraged Marcel Mule to play 3 minutes of music to fit, you know, the standard size of a 78?
In other words, slow it down to.
Oh.
Yeah, my guess is they would have been more likely to speed it up. I'm guessing. It's an interesting question. I haven't heard that question asked before. Should we hear another piece? Why not? The Sicilian of Pierre Lantier. Again, first performer is Marcel Mule. Track 3. Classical saxophone recording I ever heard, the Grand Award series. Pardon?
I remember those there.
It was my introduction to classical saxophone playing back when I was in high school.
What was your impression?
Pardon?
What was your impression?
Oh, I was astonished. I didn't know that there was any saxophone other than Stan Getz. I was a Stan Getz freak at the time. I played tenor only for the first 7 years of my first 7 years with the saxophone and tenor only. I'll never forget, went to the junior high director and said that I was getting a saxophone from a cousin. I'd like to be in the band next year. And he said, is it an alto or a tenor? I didn't know that there were altos and tenor. I've learned a couple of things since then. But what did you hear?
to me, the vibrato mood uses, it appears a bit either on or off. It sounds very similar to the vibrato he used in the recording before, whereas I feel that the vibrato Rascher uses is more supportive to the story the piece to tell, apparently, because he switches back and forth, faster, slower, wider, slimmer, and seems to me more supportive musical-wise.
Is that all? I keep going back, I guess, to musical resident saxophone things. Were they the same tempo?
Well, no.
I don't think so. Again, just not that this is the end all or be all, but Mule's recording of the piece was 3 minutes 57 seconds. Rascher's 5 minutes 30 seconds. Percentage-wise, that's a huge difference. Deborah?
I think there's an intimacy with Rascher's playing, deep, heartfelt expression, and it feels very direct and very emotional and authentic in the expression that I would think Mule's playing is also very expressive, but it's in more of an elegant manner that maybe is not quite as intimate to me.
Something that I wanted to look into in more depth is aesthetics of German versus French music in, say, the late 19th, early 20th century. My sense is, and I could be completely wrong on this, is that the French were basically, if you play what's on the page, you've satisfied the composer's intentions, whereas the Germanic approach was more, you must get under it to its true meaning. And I think that that probably informs the approaches of both Mule and Rascher in different ways.
Perhaps we should also consider Mule's tenure with Republican Guard Band, where in so many bands you don't have that Inigal and that orchestra way of playing. It's more click track, and that's obviously that's going to carry over in his playing. That's what it's doing. Rascher never had any of that. So.
Interesting you said click track, because as I said, he also did a lot of work with motion pictures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that could
be. We are influenced by our environment, I think, Liz.
Yeah, I was thinking, and coming from a piano standpoint, listening to how each communicated with their pianist, and again, I'm just a kid, but it sounds like the...
We couldn't get along without you.
Well, but it sounds like you all dances on top of the piano in terms of the piano as a vehicle underneath him, and it just moves along. Whereas the Rascher recording, it was very communicative. It was much more, you listen to the phrases and the piano and the saxophone, both just everything worked together. It was much more organic and clearly very collaborative. And I think that goes along with the idea of almost like a quick track. It sounded like the pianist was much more the accompanist, I guess, in the first verses, the second word was together. The piano brought out the line, etc. So
The pianist in the Rascher recording is Russell Sherman. Did I read recently he just died? I thought I saw that rather recently. I'll let you choose. Preston, which movement? But you're just the pianist. You wanted to hear those 7 bars at the beginning, I know.
Oh, no!
Is the second movement a good choice? Or
Sure.
Okay, second movement, which means let's start with track number 6. I'm reminded one time I gave this presentation, and all one pianist in the audience wanted to talk about was the piano player. I wasn't really interested in the saxophone players at all, but they wanted to talk about the pianist on these recordings.
I'm very interested in saxophone as well.
Anselmo recording of about 1960, and now it's still from that Grand Award recording, track 9.
Skip.
Isn't that very nice piano? Turn it up a little bit. I guess that's all there is.
And more?
so shy. Yes.
I'm just wondering where the audio transfer came from, because I've done a transfer of the same album and it just sounded like there were a lot of problems technically in the, just in the transfer sonically.
I did it.
Yeah, okay.
I
I mean, it could have been, you know, more not this.
I've got the original LPs and a little something that puts it onto a CD. There you go. I don't know how the machine does it.
I think we made it from a brand new one.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
as I said, mine is well listened to.
Kind of lost some of the overdubs. But still, message comes through.
It does. No comments about that?
You hear two very different approaches to music making.
Yes.
And it's similar in the other two examples.
Before I give you your choice on Iber, there is one fact about these two recordings that might be of interest to you. One of you probably already figured out what I'm going to do here. On one of the recordings, where was that? Yes, in one of the recordings, the last movement takes 3 minutes and 34 seconds, and the other recording, the last movement takes 3 minutes and 25 seconds. Which is which? Rascher's is the faster.
Of which?
I shouldn't say faster, I should say shorter.
Of Iber?
No, Preston.
Oh, yeah.
Preston Sonata.
Okay.
But the third moment, you say.
Yes.
Yeah, third one, Preston.
Can we get the beginning?
If your father's.
They're both.
Okay. Let's start
The third movement of the
Preston, yes?
Yeah.
Yep. Track 7.
But just short. We don't
comments or anything, or did you have a choice of Ibert? Anybody want to hear Ibert?
Sure.
Sure. Which? I can offer you the first movement. I can feel like a waiter. I can offer you the first movement, the second movement, the third movement, or the cadenza. Cadenza. Well, first movement first. First movement first, which would be track 11 for Mule. This is the 1953 recording of the Paris Philharmonic. Track 15, please. By the way, I have a recording of Mule playing that run up to the A at the bottom of the page in the altissimo. He said, well, that's not it. He said that he would do it with piano, but not with orchestra.
But he did it with orchestra in Boston.
I haven't heard that recording.
There's a live recording of Mule doing it.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Why did you say you would only do it with piano?
Why play with piano?
Pardon?
Why play in public with piano?
Well, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that it was told to me, he felt that with orchestra the stakes were too high. That was always told to me. So it would be track 15. No. Well, not there. You're probably hitting track 15, but that's not it. 14. Try 14 and see what happens. This is the Library of Congress performance of 1958. Comments?
Without a conductor.
I'm sorry?
Without a conductor and only 11 instruments.
Yes, yes. I think I thought that Louis Krasner was on the first violin and leading from that spot. I did not know that. Have to keep an eye on the clock, obviously, and I would like to share some video with you. As you can see, that's at the bottom of that handout. We'll start with, this is from the Sigurd Rascher, the saxophone, the Busher, the video that the Busher people made in 1957, I think is the year. And that is from that flash drive, please.
On YouTube, yeah. On YouTube, yeah.
Number 3. Track 3 from that flash drive. Just to give you a sense of the person, I think. It seems to take a little while to download.
The first thing to remember about the tone is the harmony. That simply means the placement of the mouthpiece in the mouth. We are also more or less in all of the teeth. And we place the mouthpiece on the lip, breathe down,
hope each of you have seen that before. If not, then I guess it's about time. I think it gives a sense of the person. And I think the next track will also, which is from a more recently produced video. This is Mule in the 1990s, maybe about 1995. But I think it will still give you a sense of the personality of Mule. Track number 1.
Sorry, Tom, we have a rehearsal. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. If you can't hear it, it's okay. It's
Il avait précédemment été beaucoup à Paris, jusqu'au moment où il s'était engagé pour faire son service militaire, dans une musique. La fois là, comme il était très doué, il avait appris beaucoup de choses. Il avait fréquenté, assisté à beaucoup de concerts. Il avait lui-même des camarades au régiment, qui étaient très bons instrumentistes. Pas tellement dans le saxophone, mais plutôt dans les autres. La fois, il avait retenu l'essentiel de tout cela. Il était devenu un excellent dessinateur. Il jouait saxophone très bien, pour l'époque, on jouait comme cela. On jouait avec un son, j'appellerais le son droit. C'est pas comme un clarinettiste au fond. Il faut avoir une belle qualité de son. Puis donner un peu moins d'intensité expressive qu'on le fait maintenant. Mais il était vraiment d'un haut, très haut niveau. Et il m'a appris un peu comme cela. Et il m'a donné en somme au maximum de ce qu'il savait faire lui-même. Je suis arrivé même à le dépasser. Les enfants, ça va toujours un peu de et puis la fanfare, pardonnez la fanfare.
La fanfare, c'était peut-être à cette époque la seule possibilité d'apprendre le saxophone.
Ah, bah, je bien. Et comme il était saxophoniste, qui dirigeait cette fanfare, il donnait beaucoup d'importance au saxophone, tant par la qualité que par la quantité. Parce que je me rappelle qu'on était une douzaine de saxophonistes, sur 40 musiciens. Et il préférait cela parce qu'il trouvait que les saxophonistes, même amateurs, jouaient mieux leur instrument que les trompettistes et d'autres instruments purs. Alors, peu de temps après, ça c'était entre 7 ans et demi avant. 9 ans, alors j'ai commencé le violon.
And I say, I hope each of those videos gives you a sense of who these people were. I think the music does, their writings do, but hearing them speak, seeing them speak, I think also helps with it.
Could I just ask, was he 95 when that was taken?
He was in his 90s, yes.
Yeah, just in the days. And did the two of them have any communication?
Oh, yes.
Collaboration?
Well, yes, there are lots of letters between the two. They're direct archives.
One must get their Potsdam.
Fredonia.
Fredonia, excuse me. Well, Potsdam's nice too, but Fredonia's even better. Well, to sum up,
No, they have a very cordial relationship.
as we would all hope, we all would at the Congress.
Please respect.
Well, to sum up, it's impossible for me, and perhaps for others, to conceive of the classical saxophone without these two artists. Thanks to their dedication to the instrument, saxophone pedagogy and performance are founded on their achievements and contributions. Mule's and Rascher's students and succeeding generations of students reflect their artistic approaches to the saxophone. The many contributions to our instrument by these two musicians will continue to bear fruit as long as those of us who follow, read their writings, listen to their recordings, and perform the literature which they inspire. Thank you for letting me share these two with you.